If you want to win more games and know how to play against double pawns, then I welcome you to this video. I will guide you through a game from the starting position. There will be few questions for you to answer. Take your time and let's not waste any time and jump right into it. The game started with e4, c6, knight f3. I'll not spend too much time on explaining anything about the opening. Want to get to a position where the double pawns really show and matter. h3, bishop h5, bishop e3, knight f6, knight to d2, knight to d7, normal developing moves. c3, bishop to g6, e5, knight d5, and now an interesting move, e6, pawn sacrifice to develop, to block and delay black's development. Black took, bishop e2. And now the first question already for you guys. Why did white allow for black to take the bishop? And why did black not do it? Why did he play e5 in the game? So have a look, take a second. And black wanted to avoid the following line. Let's say he would take on e3, white takes back. Then, for example, queen to c7 to prepare queenside castling. And white can straight away attack the pawn on e6. Then, for example, bishop to f7, and white can castle and have an attack on f7. So knight to f6 and bishop g4. And the king is not developed yet, still in the center. The double pawns are weak, and especially e6 is very weak for white. And white is already at +2 if we ask the engine, and black is very uncomfortable defending this position. Okay, let's jump back to the game. In the game, black played e5, white takes on e5, the knight takes, and we have the first double pawn in the real game. Bishop h5, now black takes on e3, white takes with a check, and the second one. White takes back with the pawn, with an isolated pawn now, and queen to d3. And now it looks like, yeah, quite dangerous, but in reality, white will have a quite easy game, an easy plan to follow. Queen to f3, e6, and black has one more pawn, but because of those weak pawns, white is trying to force an endgame, and is doing so by queen to e4. The queen takes, the knight takes, bishop e7, developing the bishop, king to e2, not even castling anymore at this point of the game, rook to d8, and white really wants to trade off the pieces. The rook takes, and rook f1, and b6 by black. Now the second question for you guys, why did black play b6 and not any more active move? Why specifically b6? Take a second. And the answer is because he wanted to avoid the following moves. For example, knight to f2. And let's just make one useless move. Rook to d7. And if white would go to d3, then black can now defend the pawn with bishop to f6. I also block the open file for white. And that's not possible if you don't play b6. Because now the white knight can't go to c5 anymore. And that's the only quite simple reason why black played b6. So rook f1, b6. White played knight f2 anyway. And now rook d5. Centralize the piece. Knight to d3. Bishop f6. And now white played knight to b4, rook b5, and we attack the rook. Rook c5, e4, and now actually the rook is isolated. So bringing the rook to d5 that early was a mistake. Probably would have been better to place it on d7. So black played b5. And now already the last question for you guys. What would you play if instead of b5, black would have played a5? Take a second and try to remember the rook is isolated here. He can't really get out of this. And that's why white can play king to d3. And now there are two options. Black can take, and that's quite simple. We simply take back, and the rook doesn't have any squares. And the second option, if black plays b5, then we can simply play knight to a6. Rook to c4 is the only possible move. And we play b3. And the rook is isolated and lost again. That's why there was no a5, but b5. White responded with a5 himself. Bishop d8, attacking the pawn. Then rook to a1, defending it. Rook c4. King d3 to defend the pawn. Bishop e7, a double attack on the knight. And now knight a6. And if you're not careful, in the next move b3 will trap the rook again. That's why he has to go to a4 now to trade the rooks. That's exactly what happened in the game. He has to take back. And now knight to b8. And now it slowly shows how weak those pawns are. They can't support each other. We have double pawn on the a file, e file, and g file. Now black plays a3, because if you play c5, for example, then king c4, and in the next move you will lose a pawn if the knight goes to d7. That's why after knight b8, a3, we can take the pawn. We have to take the pawn, otherwise it will promote. The bishop takes, and now the knight takes on c6 with a next double attack on the weak pawns. Bishop c5, king c4, bishop g1, king b5, and white is not wasting any time. He's straight up going for the promotion of this pawn and getting rid of a7, and there's nothing black can do against it. King to f6, the knight takes, and now black surrendered after a few moves. For example, you can take now, and there's now no way black can stop the pawn. There wasn't really any special tactic that won white the game, just the fact that he made use of the double pawns in the game and wasn't afraid to trade down to an endgame, even if he was initially one pawn down. But he made perfect use of his open files, of his active knight, and in this case you can see a game where the knight was way stronger than the black bishop. Stay tuned for more chess, like the video, leave a comment, and enjoy your day.